Hello, Woden's Day. What we've got here in the opening chart, although I've cut the information off, is, you'll have to take my word for it or follow the link, the different countries along the bottom and percentages, or a number that I'll explain, obviously on the other axis. Now Italy, what it means is at about 90 of the money that the Italian government spends, it gets 90% of that money into its exchequer in taxes. It spends 100%, it gets 90% back in taxes. Now working backwards through the bad people, Portugal, Spain, Greece are up in the middle, 85. They get 85% of their expenditure, their national expenditure, into the national exchequer. The UK, Japan and Ireland, slightly lower, around 80% of the amount that the government spend is brought in taxes, of various taxes and duties, etc., and all that sort of stuff. So, who's the naughty one here? It's the little fellow on the end, that end. The United States of America. Government spends $100, but only gets in to the Treasury $65 for that. All the rest of these basket case European countries and Japan at least get into their exchequer near 80% of what they spend, but the United States can only manage 65%. Now, I think they should be hoping that the United States is very special indeed, or that, let's move on to number 2, the Washington Post running an article on modern monetary theory, and there might be an out for them using modern monetary theory. And it's actually a very good article to read, because, I mean, it's just in the popular-ish Washington Post. But it's not totally unfair to MMT, but obviously it's got to give it meh, because it doesn't really understand it, probably. But it tries, at least. Both sides, the people that don't like the idea of MMT and the people that do like the MMT, would be satisfied with the presentation of this article, probably. It's quite balanced in the way it's put on. And it's starting with Jamie Galbraith, who... It's a bad place to start, because anybody who comes across that loudmouth ginger nerd is instantly put off. He's quite revolting. His father was all right. But besides starting off with Jamie Galbraith, the whole article is well worth reading. And quite frankly, the United States either needs something miraculous like MMT, or it needs some other miracle. Because on normal, basic accounting, the United States of America is fucked. Right, but don't worry, because calculated risk, Department of Transport, would that be the DOT, vehicle miles driven in the United States increased 1.3% in December. The United States is getting back on the road. So, calculated risk, what we get is a chart, 3B. And there's the chart. You can see it at the end, that 1.3% increase. You see it at the end? The end there? Yeah? Alright, the chart goes back to 1971 that gives us the... But there is the most iddly-widdly-twiddly little turn up at the end. That's the driving miles increasing by 1.3%. But you can see basically the shape of it. It is a plateau or turning downwards. Yeah. Okay. Life on the plateau is a blog posting by Early Warning. Naturally, the link will be in the right place, so we're on number 4. The New York Times had a piece over the weekend that looked at the political risks to the Obama administration due to rising gas prices. At the pump, gas prices. So this presumably is indented, so it's taken from the New York Times. Rising gasoline prices trumpeted in foot tall numbers on street corners across the country are causing concern among advisers to President Obama. That a budding sense of economic optimism could be undermined just as he heads into the general election. White House officials are preparing for Republicans to use consumer angst about the cost of oil and gas to condemn his energy programs and buttress their arguments that his economic policies are not working. In a closed-door meeting last week, Speaker John A. Boehner instructed fellow Republicans to embrace the gas pump anger they find among their constituents when they return to their districts from the President's Day recess. You've got to exploit what you get. This is politics, isn't it? But I'm just going to throw in a bit of a naughty one. I normally try to keep off this, but we know who the influential people want to win this election, and it is not President Barack Obama. And there is a reasonable chance, let's say, that they will try to manipulate oil prices to go up for the next 6 months or so. Do we pencil this in as at least a possibility? I think I do, because we know what politicians are like. Speaking of politicians, number 5, Carl Denninger, who is normally a bit of a Ron Paul fan, but he's dragged this out because, although he might like Ron Paul, he does not like naughtiness. You can see I've carved this from the middle of one of his posts. But James's recollection and new documents obtained by Roll Call, and you can follow and find out who Roll Call are. They sound really, they're a decent outfit. They're not just a wild blog or anything. Suggests that Paul, that's Ron Paul, was aware that he was often being reimbursed twice for individual flights. In all, Roll Call found 26 flights in which several layers of documentation showed double payments. Credit card statements that detail the ticket purchases, a payment to Paul from his taxpayer-funded house account for reimbursement of a flight, and Federal Election Commission records or copies of checks that verify a second payment from a second group for the same flight. Inadvertent, eh? Says Carl. Well, let's see. We have 26 documented cases and 31 more that look suspicious. For example, on January 18, 2005, Paul purchased a Continental Airlines ticket from Washington, D.C. to Montrose, Colorado, via Denver for $1,000-something bucks. The Liberty Committee paid for the ticket and one other flight with a February 21 check signed by LeBlanc. But taxpayers also paid Paul the $1,000 and some dollars for the same flight on February the 11th. The whole United Kingdom has just been through all this, finding that government officials, elected members of Parliament, had been fiddling their expenses, and some of them were actually sent to jail. But we doubt that will happen in the United States of America. Right, leave America behind and we'll go to Australia. Hello, Australia. I know there are quite a few people watch from Australia, because I can see it in the reports. So hello. Claims about higher funding costs by Australia's Big Four have met with scepticism, same thing, from an unlikely source, a large French bank, Societe Generale. So it looks like Australian banks have put their charges up and have come up with some excuse, and SocGen have said, you what? Or you what? Tokyo-based SocGen Asia Pacific head of interest rate strategy, Christian Carrillo, said it was almost mathematically impossible that total funding costs for Australian banks were rising, as the sector argued this month, using it as a motive to lift mortgage rates independently of the Reserve Bank. The claim that the recent increase in mortgage rates is due to higher funding costs is very dubious, he said in a research note. The mortgage hikes seem aimed at protecting their high profit margins. And I think he's probably right. They've had it good for an awful long time in Australia, and will try to cling on to that for as long as bloody possible. Just over there in the east is Japan. And this is taken from The Economist, How the Mighty Have Fallen. Market cap, this is the market capitalization of the major tech firms. The market cap of NEC, Sharp, Panasonic, Fujitsu and Sony. Sony? Don't know. 2000, obviously, end of the tech boom. They were rocking and rolling up near 200, and they've trumpeted uppity-dootty down, but they're down at the moment and have been lately near a 50. They're having their own little ongoing long-term dot-com crash, dot-com crush. And you'd imagine that Japan need companies like Sony, Sharp, NEC, Panasonic and Fujitsu to be actually pumping as opposed to dumping. Right, we'll move on to this. It's Europe, and it's a tweet by Gareth Gore, who is worth following. He comes out with some really sharp stuff. It's hard to follow this, especially if you follow the graphs, the red pointy up bits. I don't understand the columns at all, but I do understand the yellow up 20 whatever it is. Now what we have here is European lenders are depositing more cash at central banks around the world. Right, the banks have got more cash via either sales or ELTRO, putting assets to the central bank and then getting cash. That costs them 1%. Put it back at the central bank and they get 0.25% at the central bank. So they are losing 0.75% on that transaction when they leave the money at a central bank, and similar things at other central banks. Why are they doing it? I'll just go through the numbers and then I'll tell you why I think they're doing it. So Deutsche Bank have got them 87% more cash, obviously with the ECB. Barclays will be with the Bank of England. Santander will be with the ECB. Credit Suisse will be with the Swiss National Bank. BNP will be with the ECB. SocGen ECB. UBS will be the Swiss National Bank, and BBVA, which is Spanish bank, will obviously be with the ECB. All up lots, especially SocGen, that their Eastern Division was having a go at Australia, because they really came under pressure a few months ago when people looked into their books. So they've got lots of cash on hand at the central bank that they've probably got from ELTRO that they're actually losing money on, so what do they need it for? Gareth Gore says some nice number crunching on banks hoarding cash on concerns things may get worse. But what things? Now, this is a question between me and you, really to you, because I am still stuck on this. They have got reserves on deposit with the central bank. Now, I think I've decided, and nobody's come at me, I don't know, but I don't think they will ever use that cash to, say, give a mortgage or to lend it to a company. Because what's the point? They do use fresh air money for that. So they will not be using that reserve, those reserves at the central bank for making mortgage loans or business loans. When Gareth says things may get worse, the banks are funded not by equity, by borrowing, because it's cheaper that way, and the shorter term the borrowing, the cheaper it is. There's an awful lot of that borrowing that is going to have to be paid back this year. They're getting the cash to pay that borrowing back. That's what I think the money's for. So we know those reserves can be used now to pay back borrowings from other banks. Now the question is, and again it goes with the question of can it use or would it use that money to make mortgage loans? When a bank makes a loan to another bank, does it use reserves to do that, or does it use fresh air money to do that? Now, I've been keeping my ears and eyes open for 4 years to find out the answer, and I still don't know the answer. But what I do know, I think I know, is when that money is to be paid back, it will be paid back by transferring the reserves that one bank has at the central bank to the bank it has, a similar bank at a central bank, and those reserves will be swapped over. If it's SocGen to BNP, the central bank will all just organise the transfer of funds at the central bank, so that the money will pay back a loan. But what money was loaned out? Was it reserves in the first place that was loaned out, or was it fresh air money? If anybody really knows, or knows where I can definitely find that out, I will be much appreciated. So finish that heavy dude stuff and go to the UK and finish with Tesco's. And this funny thing that I picked out, that Tesco's were not employing, offering jobs at ridiculous, basically the government was going to pay ridiculously cheap. So they have done a news release. Tesco offers choice to work on experience, and has reacted to all that stuff. Apparently it wasn't just me that saw it and reacted to it. For some reason it was one of these meme things that got going, and Tesco have reacted to it, and now Tesco today announced that from now on any young person accepted for work experience will be offered a choice, etc., etc. And it goes to show we never know what meme is going to take off in the culture in just over a day, and what effects it could have. But all we can say is that it's always worth trying, because it might spark something. There's no point ever just sitting there saying my little something won't do anything. Now in this modern media that's bouncing around the globe, it's always worth giving it a go. A video, a comment, whatever it might be, it all makes for effect. Leave you with this effect. Bye.